This is a tale of an ancient civilization, of builders who reached too far, of dimensions beyond our own, and of a world left behind, waiting for someone new to discover its secrets. The world before. Long, long ago, the world of Minecraft was not as you know it today. It was not empty. It was not silent. It was filled with a thriving civilization of builders, architects, and explorers who shaped the land and bent it to their will. These ancient builders were remarkably advanced. They understood redstone and its power to create complex machinery. They mined deep into the earth, extracting diamonds and gold and every precious resource the world had to offer. They built enormous structures, temples in the desert and jungle, monuments beneath the ocean, mansions in the dark forests. They were masters of their world. But they were not content with just one dimension. They were explorers, always pushing further, always seeking more. And in their explorations, they discovered something that would change everything. They found a way to travel between dimensions. The first portal they created led to a terrible place, a dimension of fire and suffering, of endless lava lakes and fortresses of dark brick. They called this place the Nether. It was a hellish realm, but it was also rich with resources that didn't exist in the overworld. Quartz that glowed softly. A strange, ancient debris that could be forged into the strongest material known. Soul sand that whispered with the voices of the lost. The ancient builders were afraid of the Nether at first, as anyone would be. But they were also ambitious. They began to build there, creating safe pathways through the fire, establishing fortresses where they could work and study. They brought with them something from their world, pigs, simple animals that they hoped might adapt to this harsh environment. But the Nether changed things. The pigs, exposed to the dimensional energy and the hostile environment, transformed. They became something new, something twisted. They became piglins, creatures that still held some intelligence, still could craft and trade, but were no longer the simple animals they once were. The ancient builders watched in horror as their livestock evolved into a new species right before their eyes. They should have taken this as a warning. They should have realized that the Nether was not a place to be trifled with, that its very nature corrupted and changed things. But they didn't stop. They never stopped. In the Nether, they found something extraordinary. Fossils. Massive rib cages embedded in the soul sand valleys, bones too large to comprehend. Whatever creatures had lived and died here were beyond anything in the overworld. And if there were fossils, that meant the Nether had once been different. It had a history. It had secrets. The builders became obsessed with understanding these secrets. They built their fortresses larger, more complex. They studied the strange properties of the dimension, learning to brew potions and create enchantments by harnessing its energy. They discovered blaze rods that burned with eternal fire, ender pearls from creatures that could teleport, and eventually, they found a way to combine these elements. They created the Eyes of Ender. And with these eyes, they discovered something that would doom them all. The end. The Eyes of Ender pointed to something hidden deep beneath the surface of the overworld. Following their guidance, the ancient builders dug down, creating massive underground strongholds of stone, brick, and iron bars. These weren't just shelters or mines, these were bunkers, fortifications, places of great importance and great danger. At the heart of each stronghold, they built a portal frame. 12 blocks arranged in a square, each requiring an Eye of Ender to activate. The builders knew this portal led somewhere the eyes desperately wanted to go. And eventually, their curiosity overcame their caution. They activated the portal and stepped through into a dimension that should never have been found. The end. It was a place of floating islands suspended over an infinite void, made of a pale stone that seemed to drink in light. And it was not empty. It was inhabited by tall, dark creatures with purple eyes, Endermen, beings that could teleport in the blink of an eye, that screamed when looked at, that seemed both terrified and terrifying. And in the center of it all, on the largest island, they found her. The Ender Dragon. She was enormous, powerful, and ancient beyond measure. This was her domain, her prison, her kingdom. The builders had intruded into a place they were never meant to be, and the dragon did not welcome them. Some of the builders tried to fight. They brought their best weapons, their strongest armor, their most powerful enchantments. But the dragon was too strong. She destroyed them, and when she did, something strange happened. Their bodies didn't die, not exactly. The dimension itself changed them, just as the Nether had changed the pigs. The builders who fell became Endermen, trapped forever in the end, unable to leave, cursed to wander the void for eternity. Those builders who survived the dragon's wrath fled back through the portal in terror. But they brought something back with them, knowledge. They had seen the dragon, seen how she healed herself from the crystals atop the obsidian pillars. They had learned that the end was not just another dimension to exploit. It was a prison, a trap, and they had barely escaped with their lives. The builders who escaped were changed by the experience. They knew they had made a terrible mistake. They began to record their knowledge, their warnings, their regrets. They wrote in the books you can find in the strongholds, though the language is strange and difficult to read. They knew that others might come after them, might make the same mistakes. But their civilization was already beginning to crumble. The Wither and the Warden. Having seen the horrors of the end, some builders became obsessed with creating a force that could protect them from such threats. If an Ender Dragon existed, they reasoned, they needed something equally powerful on their side. They experimented with the darkest magic they had discovered in the Nether. They took soul sand, which already whispered with trapped souls, and wither skeleton skulls, remnants of the most dangerous creatures in that hellish dimension. They arranged them in a specific pattern and brought them to life. They created the Wither. It was a catastrophic mistake. The Wither was powerful, yes, but it was also uncontrollable. It was destruction incarnate, a being of pure hatred and chaos. It turned on its creators immediately, firing explosive skulls that brought the Wither effect, a decay that ate away at life itself. The Wither didn't distinguish between friend and enemy. It simply destroyed everything. The builders tried to stop it, tried to kill it, but the Wither was nearly immortal. When it took enough damage, it created a barrier that prevented all ranged attacks. It regenerated health. It flew beyond their reach. Whole cities fell to the Wither's rampage before they finally managed to contain and destroy one. But they had created more than one. The Withers spread, and everywhere they went, they brought devastation. The roses that once grew naturally in the world withered and died, only surviving in rare, protected biomes. The land itself was scarred. And in their desperation to stop the Withers and protect what remained, the builders created something else. Something even more terrible, though in a different way. Deep underground, in the places they had carved out for their cities, they created a guardian. They used Skulk, a strange substance that grew in the deepest dark, that pulsed with a kind of life. They created the Warden. The Warden was meant to protect the ancient cities, to keep intruders away from their most precious vaults and secrets. It was blind but could hear even the faintest footstep. It was stronger than anything they had ever created, able to kill even a fully armored warrior in just 2 blows. It was perfect for its purpose. Too perfect. The Warden didn't distinguish between the builders and intruders either. And once the Skulk began to spread, feeding on the death and chaos of the Wither attacks, the ancient cities became death traps. The builders couldn't safely enter their own strongholds anymore. The deep dark became forbidden, a place where even walking created enough sound to summon instant death. Between the Withers above and the Wardens below, the ancient builder civilization was being crushed from both sides. The Exodus. The builders realized their world was dying, poisoned by their own ambition and mistakes. They had created monsters they couldn't control. They had opened portals to dimensions that corrupted everything they touched. They had pushed too far, learned too much, and now they were paying the price. Different groups made different choices. Some builders refused to give up on the overworld. They retreated to the most remote places they could find, strongholds in the far corners of the world, mansions in the darkest forests, monuments deep beneath the ocean waves. They used illusions and magic to hide, to protect themselves. Over time, isolated and desperate, they changed. They became the Illagers, villagers twisted by dark magic and bitterness, hostile to outsiders, paranoid and cruel. Others made a different choice. They decided to abandon everything they had built and start over. They removed their tools and weapons, gave up their technology and enchantments, and became simple. They became the villagers, peaceful and passive, living in small communities, trading emeralds, and never venturing far from home. They forgot their history, or perhaps they chose to forget it. The past was too painful, too filled with mistakes. But some builders couldn't let go. They couldn't abandon the possibility of power, of immortality, of victory over death itself. These builders looked at the one dimension they had discovered that seemed to hold the secret to eternal life. The end. Yes, the end had killed many of them, transformed them into Endermen. But those Endermen didn't truly die, did they? They existed, forever. And that was a kind of immortality. If they could just find a way to harness that power, to control it rather than be consumed by it. These builders, the most ambitious and the most foolish, decided to return to the end. But this time, they wouldn't run. This time, they would stay. They would make the end their home. They would transform themselves deliberately, taking control of the process before the dimension could take control of them. They brought with them a special fruit they had cultivated, something that had been touched by the end's energy. They built cities on the outer islands of the end, far from the dragon's central island. And then they ate the chorus fruit and allowed the transformation to begin. They became Endermen, but not the mindless ones who had been created through death and dragon fire. These were willing converts, and they maintained more of their intelligence, their purpose. But they paid a price. They could no longer tolerate water, it burned them like acid. They couldn't be looked at directly without flying into a rage. They could only hold single blocks, their hands no longer capable of the fine manipulation needed for tools and crafting. And they built one final monument to their civilization, the End Cities. Towers of purple block reaching into the void, filled with the treasures they had brought with them. Guarded by Shulkers, creatures they had either created or discovered in the end. And at the peak of some cities, they placed their greatest achievement, the Elytra, wings that would allow one to fly without the need for portals or magic. These End Cities were tombs and treasure vaults both, the final resting place of a civilization's greatest works. The Silent World. And then there was silence. The ancient builders were gone. Some had transformed into Illagers and villagers. Some had become Endermen. Many had simply died, killed by the Wither, the Warden, the Ender Dragon, or their own experiments. The world they left behind was empty of human life but full of their ruins. Temples stood in deserts and jungles, their traps still active, their treasures still hidden. Ocean monuments pulsed with the power of elder guardians, ancient creatures left behind to protect, what? There was no one left to protect it for. Strongholds sat deep underground, their portals dormant, their libraries gathering dust. The villages continued, their inhabitants trading and farming, living simple lives. They built new homes in the same style they had always built, never questioning why they built that way, never remembering that their ancestors had once constructed monuments that touched the sky. The Illagers lurked in their mansions and outposts, twisted by isolation and dark magic, occasionally raiding the villages and kidnapping the simple folk who had once been their brothers. The Endermen wandered both the overworld and the end, moving blocks apparently at random, teleporting when looked at, their purpose, if they ever had one, long forgotten. The Nether continued its eternal burning. The Piglins built their bastions and hoarded their gold, evolving their own culture separate from the builders who had accidentally created their species. The Wither skeletons patrolled the fortresses, guarding them from no one. Deep underground, the ancient city sat in darkness, the warden sleeping until the slightest sound would wake it. The skull continued to spread, slowly, patiently, feeding on any life that ventured too close. And in the end, the Ender Dragon circled our island eternally, waiting for the next intruder who would dare to challenge her, ready to add them to our collection of Enderman servants. The world was full of wonders and terrors, all waiting in silence. Waiting for someone new. Waiting for you. The player arrives. And then, one day, you spawn into the world. You appear on a beach, or in a forest, or on a plain of grass. You have nothing, no tools, no weapons, no knowledge of what came before. The sun is setting, and you instinctively know you need to find shelter before dark. You punch a tree, and what comes loose in your hands. You craft planks, then sticks, then a wooden pickaxe. The knowledge comes naturally, as if you've always known how to do this, as if it's written into the very fabric of the world. That first night is terrifying. Zombies claw at your door. Skeletons shoot arrows through the windows. Creepers hiss and explode if you venture too close. You hide in your dirt hovel and wait for dawn, wondering what kind of world you've entered. But you survive. And the next day, you venture out to explore. You find a village and are relieved to discover other humanoid creatures, even if they only speak in hymns and halls. They trade with you, offering tools and food for emeralds. They don't seem afraid of you, but they don't seem to really recognize you either. You're just another traitor to them, no more or less significant than any other. You explore further and find a desert temple, half buried in sand. Inside, you carefully avoid the pressure plate trap and discover treasures, diamonds, emeralds, enchanted books. Someone built this. Someone left these things here. But who? And why? You mine deeper and discover caves filled with resources. You fight monsters in the dark. You learn to create better tools, better armor. You discover redstone and begin to understand its power, creating simple mechanisms at first, then more complex ones. One day, you stumble into a ravine and see it at the bottom, a strange stone brick structure, clearly artificial, clearly ancient. It's a stronghold. Your first instinct is excitement, but as you explore its corridors, fighting off silverfish and cave spiders, you begin to feel something else. Unease. This place was built for a purpose. The libraries contain books in a language you can't quite read, but you can make out words here and there. Words like warning and danger and end. There are prison cells, empty now. There are corridors that lead nowhere. And at the heart of it all, there's a room with a portal frame, empty and inactive. You've found enough Eyes of Ender by now to know what goes in those frames. And something inside you, some instinct, tells you that you need to activate this portal. You need to see what's on the other side. But maybe not yet. You're not ready yet. Building your own story. So you return to the surface and you build. Just as the ancient builders did, you create. You start with a simple house, but it grows. You add rooms, floors, towers. You create farms to grow wheat and carrots. You build animal pens and fill them with cows and sheep and chickens. You're not just surviving anymore. You're thriving. You're making this world your own. You venture into the Nether, just as the ancient builders did. Your first trip is terrifying. The moment you step through the portal, you're surrounded by fire and hostile piglins and ghasts that shoot explosive fireballs. But you adapt. You build safe pathways. You construct a base around your portal. You learn to trade with the piglins, offering gold for ender pearls and other valuable items. You explore and find a fortress, and inside you battle blaze and wither skeletons. You collect their drops, knowing you'll need them eventually. You mine ancient debris and create netherite, the strongest material in the game, proof that you've mastered this dimension just as the ancient civilization once did. And sometimes, in the nether, you see them, the massive fossils embedded in the soul sand valleys. Rib cages of creatures that must have been impossibly large. You wonder what they were, how they died, why they're here. The nether doesn't give up its secrets easily. Back in the overworld, you continue to explore. You find ocean monuments and train them, battling elder guardians for their treasure. You discover mansions and dark forests and fight villagers who seem to hate you on sight, who attack with axes and magic. You don't know why they're so hostile, why they look almost like villagers but so different. You don't know that they're the descendants of the same civilization, divided by choices made long ago. You find jungle temples and desert pyramids. You discover igloos with secret basements containing mysteries you don't fully understand, a villager and a zombie villager, a brewing stand, a weakness potion. It's like someone was working on a cure, but why leave it here, abandoned? Every structure you find raises more questions. Who built these? Where did they go? Why did they leave everything behind? The deep dark. One day, mining deep below, you break through into a cavern unlike any you've seen before. The stone is covered in skulk, a dark substance that seems to pulse with a faint glow. Skulk sensors set the landscape, activating when you make the slightest sound. And deeper in, you see the ruins of a city, ancient and abandoned. You venture carefully into the ancient city, knowing instinctively that you need to be quiet. You sneak past the sensors, your heart pounding. The city is massive, filled with structures and loot, but also filled with danger. The skulk is everywhere, and the deeper you go, the more you feel like you're being watched. In the center of the city, you find the most valuable loot, enchanted books, diamond equipment, and strange new items. But you also trigger a sensor, and suddenly the skulk begins to pulse faster. A shriek builds in the darkness, and then it emerges. The Warden. You've never seen anything like it. It's massive, ancient, and moves with a terrible purpose. You freeze, hoping it will pass, but you make a sound, just the smallest step, and it turns toward you. You run, panic overriding strategy, and it pursues. One hit takes away most of your health. A second hit would kill you instantly, even in your best armor. You barely escape with your life, fleeing back to the surface, your heart racing. You understand now why the ancient cities are abandoned. You understand what the builders created to guard their most precious secrets, and you understand that it turned on them. The Warden doesn't chase you to the surface. It returns to the deep dark, waiting. Always waiting. And you wonder if you'll ever be brave enough to return. Preparations for the end. But you grow stronger. You enchant your armor with protection, your sword with sharpness, your bow with power. You brew potions, healing, regeneration, strength. You gather resources, blocks for building, food for health, ender pearls for escape. And finally, you decide you're ready. You return to the stronghold, eyes of ender in hand. You place them in the portal frame, one by one, watching as each activates with a satisfying click. When the 12th is placed, the portal roars to life, a starfield appearing in the frame, swirling and hypnotic. You take a breath, check your inventory one last time, and jump through. The end greets you with its pale stone and infinite void. You spawn on a small obsidian platform, and in the distance, you can see the main island. Endermen are everywhere, standing motionless until you make the mistake of looking at them. And circling above the tall obsidian pillars, you see her. The Ender Dragon. She notices you immediately and dives, her roar echoing across the dimension. You dodge, barely, and begin to understand the scope of the challenge ahead. You need to destroy the crystals atop the pillars first, but some are protected by iron bars. You need to build up to them, all while avoiding the dragon's attacks and not looking at the Enderman. The battle is epic and terrifying. You die, respawn, and return through the portal to try again. Each time, you learn a little more. Each time, you get a little closer to victory. Finally, you destroy the last crystal. The dragon can no longer heal, and you focus all your attacks on her. She swoops and dives, her breath dealing massive damage. But you persist, striking again and again. Your sword bites into her dark scales. Your arrows find their marks. And then, with one final strike, she falls. The Ender Dragon doesn't die like other mobs. She rises into the air, her body glowing, and explodes in a shower of experience orbs, more experience than you've ever seen. A portal appears at the center of the island, leading back to the overworld. A dragon egg appears atop the portal, a trophy of your victory. But there's also something else. A smaller bedrock portal has appeared, leading to the outer islands of the end. The outer islands and the truth. You could go home. You've defeated the dragon. You've proven yourself stronger than the ancient builders, accomplished what they couldn't. But curiosity drives you forward, just as it drove them. You throw an ender pearl through the small portal and are teleported 1,000 blocks away to the outer islands. These are different from the central island. They're covered in chorus plants and chorus fruit. And in the distance, you see them. End cities. You explore these cities carefully, fighting shulkers that shoot projectiles which make you levitate. You discover treasure rooms filled with enchanted diamond equipment, far better than anything you could craft yourself. And at the top of some cities, you find it. The Elytra. Wings. The ancient builder's final achievement. You equip them and leap off the city, expecting to fall to your death in the void. But instead, you glide, soaring through the air with a freedom you've never known. You can fly. With the Elytra, you explore more cities, gathering more treasures. And as you do, you begin to piece together the story. These cities weren't built by Endermen, they're too complex, too purposeful. They were built by the ancient builders before they transformed, or perhaps during the transformation. This was their final refuge, their last attempt at creating something permanent in a dimension they had doomed themselves to inhabit forever. The Endermen you see wandering the islands, picking up blocks and moving them seemingly at random, they're all that remains of that civilization. They're trapped here, caught between life and death, unable to leave, unable to truly die, forever altered by their own ambition. You are the heir to their world, walking through their ruins, using their tools, making the same discoveries they once made. But will you make the same mistakes? The choice. You return to the overworld through the portal, the dragon egg in your inventory, the Elytra on your back. You've conquered the end. You've defeated the greatest challenge the ancient builders ever faced. But the world is still full of mysteries. You could seek out the Wither, intentionally creating the monster that destroyed the ancient civilization, testing yourself against it just to prove you're stronger. You need a beacon, after all, and the Nether Star is the only way to create one. You could delve into the deep dark again, sneaking past or confronting the Warden, claiming the treasures of the ancient cities that even the builders themselves couldn't access in their final days. You could explore every biome, find every structure, collect every item. You could build machines more complex than the ancient builders ever dreamed of, creating farms that run automatically, railways that span thousands of blocks, redstone computers that can calculate and store information. Or you could simply build. Create beauty for its own sake. Make the world your own, not through conquest but through construction. Build cities that aren't ruins, farms that aren't abandoned, homes that are lived in. The ancient builders fell because they always pushed further, always reached for more power, always always opened the next door without thinking about what might be on the other side. They created monsters they couldn't control. They opened portals to dimensions that corrupted them. They built guardians that turned on them. But you have the benefit of their example. You can see what they achieved and what they lost. You can learn from their ruins, their abandoned cities, their warning signs written in languages half forgotten. The world of Minecraft is your inheritance, a gift and a warning from a civilization that no longer exists. What you do with it is entirely up to you. The eternal cycle. And perhaps that's the deepest lore of all. The cycle. The ancient builders rose from nothing, gathered resources, built great things, pushed too far, and fell. They left behind a world for the next inhabitant to discover. You rose from nothing, gathered resources, built great things. Will you push too far? Will you fall? And if you do, what will you leave behind for whoever comes next? Or perhaps you already understand. Perhaps you've learned to build sustainably, to explore cautiously, to respect the dangers that lurk in the deep dark and the end. Perhaps you've created a world that can last, that won't crumble into ruins. The villages continue their simple existence, the descendants of builders who gave up technology for peace. The illagers hide in their mansions, the descendants of builders who chose isolation and dark magic. The Endermen wander both worlds, the descendants of builders who chose transformation over death. And you are the new builder, the latest in a line stretching back to the beginning. You craft the same tools, mine the same resources, face the same challenges. But you also have the chance to make different choices, to break the cycle, to create something that lasts. Every block you place is a choice. Every structure you build is a statement. Every dimension you explore is a risk. The world is full of silent witnesses to your journey. The Endermen watch you with their purple eyes, perhaps recognizing something of their former selves in your building and mining. The villagers trade with you, never speaking of the ancient knowledge their ancestors chose to forget. The ruins stand as monuments to ambition and warnings of hubris. And somewhere, deep in the ancient cities, the wardens sleep, waiting for the next footstep to wake them. In the Nether, the fortresses stand ready for the next explorer brave or foolish enough to enter. In the end, the Outer Islands wait, filled with cities and treasures and the echoing loneliness of a civilization that transformed itself into something that can never go home. The quiet moments. But there are peaceful moments too, and these are just as important as the epic battles and grand discoveries. There's the simple pleasure of watching the sun rise over your base, the golden light painting everything in warm tones. The satisfaction of harvesting a full crop of wheat, knowing you have enough food to last for days. The calm of fishing by a lake, waiting for the bob to dip below the surface. There's the joy of taming a wolf and having it follow you on your adventures, a companion in a world that can feel very empty. The amusement of watching chickens wander around your base, laying eggs seemingly at random. The pride of seeing your base grow from a simple dirt hut to a sprawling complex of buildings, farms, and defensive walls. These quiet moments are what make a world feel like home. The ancient builders must have experienced them too, in the days before their ambition consumed them. They must have had farms and homes and peaceful days watching the sunset. Perhaps they forgot, in their rush for power and immortality, that these simple moments were worth preserving. That a life lived simply, building and farming and existing, had value even if it didn't last forever. You have the advantage of seeing what their ambition cost them. You can choose differently. You can build a home, not a monument. You can create a sustainable world, not an empire destined to fall. Or you can follow in their footsteps, pushing ever further, seeking ever more, until you do transform into something else or create something you can't control. The choice, as always, is yours. The unanswered questions. Despite everything you've discovered, despite all the ruins you've explored and the dimensions you've conquered, there are still mysteries in Minecraft that may never be fully explained. What are the ocean monuments, really? Why do Elder Guardians exist at all? What were they guarding, and for whom? Why do igloos sometimes have secret basements with zombie villagers and the materials to cure them? Who set up these hidden laboratories, and why did they abandon them? What causes lightning to strike certain places, sometimes turning villagers into witches or pigs into zombie pigmen? Is there an intelligence behind it, or is it random chaos? The fossils in the Nether, what were those creatures? Did they live there before it became a hellish dimension, or were they always suited to fire and lava? The music discs you find in dungeons and creeper drops, who composed them? They speak of a world with artists and musicians, but where did they go? Herobrine, the legend whispered about in loading screens and patch notes that say removed Herobrine. Was there ever truly something to remove, or is it just a game the developers play with the community? These mysteries add depth to the world. Not everything needs an answer. Not everything should be explained. Part of the wonder of Minecraft is that it allows you to imagine your own answers, to create your own lore alongside the implied history. Maybe the ocean monuments were built by an aquatic race that existed before the builders, wiped out by some catastrophe. Maybe the igloo's basements were set up by a scientist working on a cure for zombification, killed before they could complete their work. Maybe the nether fossils are from the ancient builders' first failed experiments, creatures that escaped and grew too large before dying in the wastes. Or maybe the explanations are simpler, stranger, or more complex than anything you could imagine. The beauty of Minecraft's lore is that it's told through environment and implication, never through explicit text or cutscenes. You discover it at your own pace, in your own way, and you're free to interpret it however you like. The Enderman's perspective. Have you ever stopped to think about what the game looks like from an Enderman's perspective? You are a builder who transformed yourself, hoping to achieve immortality in a dimension beyond death. You succeeded, in a way. You cannot truly die, you exist forever. But you paid a terrible price. You can't remember your name. You can't remember your family or friends. You can barely remember what you were before the transformation. All you know is that you must move blocks, one at a time, building and unbuilding, creating and destroying. It's instinct now, the last remnant of what you once were. You see a new builder arrive in your world. They look like you once did, upright, capable, creative. They mine and build and explore just as you once did. And when they look at you, directly in the eyes, you feel rage and pain and something you can't quite name. Recognition, perhaps. Or shame. You teleport away, screaming, unable to bear being seen for what you've become. Sometimes you wander back to the overworld, the dimension you once called home. You pick up blocks, a piece of grass, a flower, dirt, stone, and you carry them with you, unable to explain why. Returning home, perhaps. Trying to rebuild something you can no longer remember. The rain hurts you now. Water burns like acid. You can't understand why water was once necessary for life, for farming, for survival. But your transformed body rejects it, and you must hide when it rains, teleporting to shelter, suffering. And deep down, in whatever fragment of consciousness remains, you wonder, was it worth it? You achieved immortality, yes. But at what cost? You can't die, but you can't truly live either. You're trapped between states, forever. When the new builder defeats the dragon and explores the outer islands, finding the end cities you helped build in your final days of transformation, do you feel pride? Sorrow? Anything at all? You can't answer. You can only teleport through the void, carrying your single block, existing in an eternal present with no past and no future. This is the fate the ancient builders chose for themselves. This is the price of immortality. The villager's dream. And what of the villagers? What do they dream of in their beds at night? They are the descendants of builders who chose peace over power, simplicity over complexity. They gave up their tools and weapons, their redstone and their enchantments. They chose to forget. But do they truly not remember? Or is the memory buried deep, surfacing in dreams? Perhaps a villager dreams of great cities they've never seen, towering structures of stone and glass reaching toward the sky. Perhaps they dream of flying through the air on wings of metal and leather, soaring over oceans and mountains. Perhaps they dream of fighting great monsters with swords that glow with enchantments, wearing armor stronger than diamond. Perhaps they dream of traveling between dimensions, stepping through portals of purple light into worlds of fire or endless void. And then they wake in their simple bed in their simple village, and they feel, what? Loss. Relief. They don't have the words to express it, speaking only in hymns and haws. They tend their farms. They trade their emeralds. They retreat indoors when night falls and the monsters emerge. They live simple, safe lives, never venturing far from home. And if a new builder appears, they trade with them peacefully, offering tools and armor and enchanted books, knowledge they themselves have forgotten how to use, knowledge passed down through generations as trade goods rather than as tools for their own use. Sometimes iron golems appear in their villages, massive guardians created by, what? The villagers don't build them consciously. But when enough villagers gather, when their collective unconscious reaches a critical mass, an iron golem manifests, protecting them from zombies and raiders. It's as if the knowledge of creation still exists within them, buried so deep it can only emerge unconsciously. They are builders still, but builders who have forgotten they can build. Is this peace? Or is it a kind of death? The villagers don't philosophize about it. They simply exist, day after day, trading and farming and sleeping, perhaps dreaming of glories they've forgotten and dangers they've escaped. The world that remains. And so we return to you, the player, standing in a world caught between past and future. The ancient builders are gone, transformed or devolved or simply vanished. Their ruins dot the landscape, monuments to ambition and warnings of hubris. The monsters they created or awakened still roam the night. The dimensions they opened remain accessible, dangerous, and full of treasures. But the world is not dead. It's waiting. Waiting for someone to make different choices, to build something lasting, to perhaps succeed where the ancient builders failed. Or waiting to repeat the cycle. For you to push too far, to create monsters you can't control, to open portals you shouldn't, to fall just as they did, leaving your own ruins for the next builder to discover. The sun rises and sets. The moon phases through its cycle. Villagers wake and sleep and trade. Endermen teleport through the darkness. The Ender Dragon circles our island, eternal and patient. And you build. One block at a time, one structure at a time, one choice at a time. This is the lore of Minecraft. Not a story told through cutscenes or dialogue, but a story implied through ruins and mysteries, through the strange ecology of monsters and villagers, through the very structure of the world itself. It's a story about builders and what they create. About ambition and consequence. About the cycle of rise and fall that perhaps can be broken, or perhaps is inevitable. It's a story about transformation, pigs into piglins, builders into endermen, villagers into illagers. About how environments change us, how our choices shape not just our world but ourselves. And ultimately, it's a story about you. About what you choose to build, what you choose to explore, what you choose to risk. About whether you learn from the past or repeat it. About what you leave behind when you're gone. The ancient builders left questions. What will you leave? Answers. More questions. Ruins of your own. Or something that lasts. The night falls. The sun is setting now. Night comes to the world of Minecraft, as it always does. The monsters will spawn soon. Zombies groaning, skeletons rattling, creepers hissing their warning before exploding. Endermen will teleport through the darkness, their purple eyes glowing. But you're safe in your base, surrounded by torches and walls. You've prepared for this, learned to protect yourself. You're not the helpless newcomer who spawned on that first day, desperately punching trees and hiding in a dirt hole. You've grown. You've explored. You've conquered dimensions and defeated dragons and claimed treasures from ancient cities. You've built structures that might one day be ruins for another builder to discover, or might stand forever, maintained and lived in and loved. Outside, the night is dark. But inside, there's light. There's safety. There's home. And tomorrow, when the sun rises again, you'll venture out once more. To build, to explore, to discover. To make the world your own, one block at a time. The ancient builders left their mark on this world, indelible and eternal. Now it's your turn. What will you create? What will you discover? What will you become? The world of Minecraft is infinite, full of mysteries and possibilities. The lore is written in ruins and structures, in the behavior of mobs and villagers, and the very bones of the world itself. And you are the latest chapter in a story that may never end, a builder in a long line of builders, facing the same choices and challenges as those who came before. Will you make the same mistakes? Or will you forge a new path? The night is quiet now. The monsters prowl outside, but they seem distant, almost peaceful in their predictability. This is the world. This is the cycle. Day and night, building and surviving, exploring and returning home. Rest now. Let the soft music of Minecraft play in your mind. The gentle piano, the ambient sounds, the peaceful melodies that accompany both triumph and loss. Tomorrow, the world will still be there, waiting for you. The ruins will still hold their secrets. The dimensions will still offer their challenges. The blocks will still be there to be placed and broken and placed again. But tonight, rest. Dream of floating in cities and ancient deep dark complexes. Dream of nether fortresses and desert temples. Dream of your own creations, the structures you've built and those you plan to build. Dream of a world that was, a world that is, and a world that could be. The story of Minecraft continues, as long as there are builders to tell it. And you are a builder. Sleep well.